So we are delighted to that you can join us at this lunchtime. As you can see on the screen, my name is Tim Wray, and I am the Director of Smurfit Executive Development, and I have the privilege of hosting this webinar today. Couple of things before I introduce Marianne, just some of the standard housekeeping. If you can keep your mic muted, that would be very helpful. Just to so we don't have any echoes and so on in the back. The chat is already open and lots of people have contributed in there as well. Please do continue to introduce yourselves. But if you have anything else you want to say, drop it into chat, and the Q&A will be open shortly. Once we've heard from Marianne, we'll be having a Q&A session after that, and we'll invite you to drop your questions into the Q&A. Clearly, we're very much looking forward to the discussion and the interaction. We definitely do not want this to be a one-way exercise. So delighted that you're here. We've said we'll be finished around 1:45, as sharp as we possibly can make it, to give you a little bit of breathing space before going on to perhaps a 2 o'clock meeting. So it's very much our intention of keeping to that timetable. And with that in mind, I need to get off the stage and I need to introduce Marianne. So delighted to introduce Dr. Marianne Roux. I've been working with Marianne for a number of years now. There are a few things about Marianne that I think are useful to know for you as an audience. I'm going to use that awful sounding word, pracademic, but actually it's a good thing because what it says is that Marianne marries the very best of academia and the very best of experience and being a practitioner herself. From an academic perspective, she's done world-class research and author of a number of books and material that she's going to share with you today. So very much anchored in that rigorous, robust, evidence-based approach, but has actually sat in the hot seat herself, operated as a consultant all over the globe, but also operated as an HR director with Cricket Australia, a really interesting appointment, and also working as the HR director of Woolworths, the food side of Woolworths in South Africa. So has walked the walk as well as talking the talk. Second thing I think you need to know about Marianne is she's a global citizen, South African by birth, lived and worked many years in Australia, now lived and worked many years based in Ireland, but operating right across the globe on all 5 continents. And I think that diversity of experience really shines through in the work that she does. So I'm not going to say any more than that because I'll just be stealing time from Marianne. I'm going to turn off my camera just for a moment and leave the stage to Marianne and invite her to share with us for about 15 minutes. And then we are going to open it up I'll come back in and we'll host a Q&A session. So Marianne, you're very welcome, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really hope you're all here because, but probably not always for the nicest reason, and that is just that we are all extremely worried right now. We are very worried about the challenges that lie ahead of us as leaders, and we are concerned about our leaders' ability to lead this kind of transformation in this level of complexity and uncertainty. And that's truly what I am interested in, helping leaders to thrive in complexity and uncertainty. And that's the work that I do. And that's what I hope we could share with you today, and also tell you about some of the programs we're running. So one of the things in my PhD research on leadership fit for the future of work is that it became really clear to us a couple of things. One is that leadership happens in context. A lot of older leadership theories and practices put leadership outside of its context. And certainly that is not how it works. Leadership works in context, and we'll talk about that context in a minute. The second thing that is very, very clear to us now in 2025 is that leadership is not a set of traits. It's not a couple of fads. It's not a color. It's not a number. It's not any of those things that we were told, and you're definitely not born with it. It is, in fact, a set of habits and practices that people can learn and that people can rewire their brains to make it a reality. It is also an ongoing process of becoming a leader. It's an ongoing process of learning, of getting feedback. And the third thing is that leadership doesn't happen in isolation. So much of the previous research was from clinical psychology, from the individual. Leadership is an interpersonal process. It is so dependent on our relationships and our ability to build relationship and understanding. And so, taking those three things in mind, let's for a moment start to say, what is the context we're leading in? And in both this work as well as in my HR transformation work, I always start here. Something we call the future of work. And what saddens me when I work with clients is I'll walk in, whether it's government, whether it's in Saudi, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's here, I walk in and I say, what is your future of work viewpoint? What are the things you're giving attention to? How have you made sense of it? Not one of my clients are able to bring me, yes, this is what we agree. This is our shared point of view. This is how we've explained it to our people. What they're doing is they're getting pushed from pillar to post by all these different things and they're not making sense of it. And it makes them feel overwhelmed. And that then comes out in how they lead. And never before have we had the level of complexity where seismic changes are converging. We've always had change, but we haven't had seismic changes converging so fast that it feels like you have whiplash every morning when you watch the news. This complexity is made up of us still being in the middle of Industry 4.0 transformation. All of us are still either starting or in the middle of digital transformation. Now, just as we got on top of that, we have AI and agentic AI. And again, so many leaders I work with don't understand AI, don't work with AI, or scared of AI, don't understand how work is changing. It's critically important that we understand that. It's critically important that we also understand the bottom part, skills-based organizations and humans. What do humans do when machines do some of the work? And how do we build skills-based organizations where we're constantly reskilling and upskilling? There's 192 million jobs coming. About 92 million will be completely displaced by AI. So we have about 100 million more jobs created than displaced, but we are not reskilling and upskilling our people fast enough to take those new jobs. We're not making time for it. We're too busy. We don't have skills ontologies in place. So those two things work together and are really important. But we also have a workforce that now after COVID want to work in a more hybrid and flexible way. And we know that Gen Z specifically wants this in any workplace. And we also know that it attracts and retains incredible talent. So how do we deliver this work, digitalized, AI-informed, skills-based, in a hybrid flexible work? And what happens when you're in an industry like construction or manufacturing? What happens there? Do you go to a 4-day work week, a 9-day fortnight? Leaders have to get around that. And then the whole employee experience of ESG, climate, how I experience when I come in there. Do you care about the climates in organization? Do you care about diversity, inclusion? Do you care about well-being? Do you understand generational differences? You need to have a point of view of what is the context we lead in. Never mind the clouds that are sitting around, which on a daily basis hits us with wartime economies, tariffs, new allies, markets, and culture wars. And these things will keep happening, and you have to keep making sense of it. Nobody's coming to do it for you. So the first thing we have to say is, if that is the context, what does leadership actually look like, and how well are we coping? And the answer is quite simply, we are not coping. So this is real work, and we're doing this every year. And actually what we're finding is that role complexity of leaders are increasing much faster than leaders' capabilities. The role complexity being the T line, and adult development, our ability to solve complex problems, our ability to maturely and calmly deal with it with a growth mindset, with focus, with grit, our ability to build our new knowledge is the red. And what's happening on the electrical scale on the left is how well we are thinking through what level of complexity we can deal with. what level of complexity we can deal with emotionally and cognitively. And what's happening is we now have a complexity gap that is increasing. We have a complexity gap from middle management level upward, where the role complexity, what the context is asking us to do, has way outstripped our ability to cope. And what leaders tend to do, and I see this everywhere at the moment, when they feel in over their heads or overwhelmed or even frozen, as I'm seeing in some of my clients. Just in the last 48 hours, I've had 2 calls, one from the US, one from the Middle East, asking me to come and solve problems that sit around that level 14, where the leaders have just gone, we have to solve this, but we have no idea where to begin. Marianne, can you just come in and help us? And I've never seen so many of these 13, 14 level complex, integrated, uncertain problems hit at the same time. But what leaders do when they're overwhelmed, they either try and control things, so they start to micromanage or put more rules in, or they try and protect themselves. So they withdraw, they become very critical, they start to push people back to the office 5 days a week, they start to block AI, so they become very protective, or they become very compliant. They become more risk averse and they keep telling me how regulated they are and how they can't take any risk. And that is a recipe for disaster because that means we're stunting that level of adult development, which we actually need to increase our adult development. And the question is, how does adult development work? Because the previous programs we've had so far have not dealt with adult development. It has simply dealt with some competencies and skills that develop us sideways, which means I'm still operating at 11, but I now know more about a change management model and know more about a strategy model, but I'm still operating at 11. There's discomfort in pulling yourself up. We know this from the sports teams I've worked with. There's discomfort in growth. We need to lean into discomfort. We need to lean into complexity, and we need to lean into uncertainty. So when I looked at all the research that had ever been done on leadership, I found that we are still using very outdated and fixed leadership models. We're still wedded to competencies and traits and hero leaders and easy quick fixes or the latest fad sold by a vendor. And we're still developing leaders using very short programs and very one-dimensional approaches. And we're not evaluating impact and we're not linking it to real business outcomes and strategies and change. There's an urgent need for us now to get our leaders complexity fit. And what it looks like is moving from leadership 1.0 out to 4.0. And 1.0 comes from the military. It comes from military leaders. It comes from the US Army doing research. It comes from Taylor's time when people were working 9 to 5, which is not real anymore in a new world where we are global and working in very different ways. We also had a little romance with Leadership 2.0, 3.0 through the 90s, 2000s. Wonderful. You have to be visionary and charismatic and transformational. Actually, that still tells me a bit of a hero leader that's just very nice now. What really needs to happen in a world that's this complex is we need to share our leadership across the organization so that everywhere people are leaders and are making decisions right for our customers, right for our people. But also in a world where humans and machines are working together, we need to become infinitely human, understand humans, and start to pull the best out of human, the creativity, the collaboration, the relationship skills, the growth mindset, the innovation. We need to do that. And we need to understand that our brains can change, that anyone can change their habits and mindsets and become a leader. But we also need to update our knowledge and skills on digital, agile, leading virtual teams. We really need to move out of very socialized ways of seeing the world to what we call very self-authoring ways. And they are uncomfortable and sometimes they're also unpopular when you do leadership the right way. So what did I find in my research? And you'll be happy to know that I've tried and tested this on many, many poor leaders, especially in the beginning. 150 CEOs worked with me from a professional services firm. And we used this model to actually turn around their business growth and the way that they solve complex problems for their clients and sell their services. And there really are 5 mindsets that I have found in all my research and work that help leaders to be complexity fit. And then there's one set that continuously changes, and that's our future fit knowledge and skills. But the 5 mindsets probably the most critical. So let's just start with each of those. The first thing that leaders do that are complexity fit is they make sense of and act on the changes around them. We call that contextual intelligence. So they scan the environment, they talk to people, they read, they listen to podcasts, but they don't just listen to it. They bring it together, discuss it, and as boards and as C-suites and as organizations, they make sense of it, and then they act on it. They change their strategies, they change their direction, they change their assumptions. That is a critical skill, outward skill. And it's also a set of practices, doing this weekly, daily. They also, and we've known this for a long time, lead themselves really well. That's the second part. But even that has evolved from 7 habits and emotional intelligence. We now know that to thrive in complexity and uncertainty, probably the most important thing is growth mindset and curiosity. Are you curious? Are you fixed, or are you growth in your mindset? Are you focused in a very distracted world? Are you emotionally agile? Are you self-aware? Where are you on personal agility and curiosity? Because without that external lens and that internal management of self, we are not doing vertical development. The third mindset and practice, and it is a mindset and practice, is ethical and moral maturity. We deeply need to build trust in people in a world that's very complex and very paradoxical, and is bringing with it, whether it's AI or data centers, AI and data centers, AI using energy. We use AI, AI uses energy. We have climate challenges. We have a lot of ethical issues to work through. But even on a daily basis, as leaders, every time we tolerate behavior that goes against the values of the organization, we lose a little bit of people's trust. We cannot have leaders that are complexity fit without having ethical and moral maturity, helping our leaders reason well, and not letting small little moral challenges and inconsistencies break the trust. The fourth thing, which is probably one of the hardest things, and that's why we start with the first 3, is my leadership identity and ego. And what happens to us is as we come through, we become engineers, we become lawyers, we become all those things, maybe an academic, we get quite stuck in wanting to be the expert, wanting to have all the answers, or outworking, out-achieving everybody. That was very much the consulting culture I grew up in. And we get stuck to that ego, and we're not able to step out of that and actually check our own assumptions and be okay with not knowing and lean into the uncertainty and complexity and think in a more systems way where we look at what is the culture, what does it mean to culture, what does it mean to people. We're not doing that. And so we get stuck in an ego that cannot evolve for us to become more complexity fit and solve more complex problems collaboratively. And the fifth one, we're in a world for shared leadership. The world is too complex for us to be individual heroes. We have to collaborate well across our ecosystems. There's a thing called over collaboration, but I'm not going to go into that right now. We have to intentionally collaborate across our ecosystem. We have to start with collaboration in mind. We find when those 5 mindsets and practices are continuously developed and evolved in organizations at all levels, we see a lot better thriving in complexity. The 6th one is one that's going to continue to change, and I would challenge you to at least twice a year uplift your knowledge and skills, whether it's AI literacy, data literacy, coaching skills, storytelling skills, human-centered design, agile ways of working, skills-based organizations. You need to not say that's IT's problem, that's HR's problem. Do you have the knowledge so that you understand what questions to ask? Do you have the knowledge so you understand which strategies to endorse? These things are critical. And very quickly touching on them, you'll see that, when we look at our contextual intelligence, that helps us to say, what does the future of work look like for my business? And do we all agree on what it looks like? And it takes out the anxiety we all have when we see things like AI is taking your job. So we have to stop pretending we have all the answers and instead really start to build what are the uncertainties we are managing and how can we gain insight on them. And then when we do our personal agility, we become complexity fit because we're curious and we discover things and we can innovate and we can solve problems. And I'll talk about Novartis in a second. And when we build our ethical intelligence, when we use that principled thinking and choosing, it's all about trust. So we've got the trust and we have the complexity fitness from a personal level, and we know what our business looks like. We then say, do we have the ego, action logic that's appropriate for complexity and ambiguity? The reality is only 10% of leaders have it. But remember, our role requires it. It changes how you see your role, how you see your function, how you interact with others. But more importantly, it makes you open to leaning into complexity. And then the intentional collaboration, ecosystemic leadership, and true co-creation helps us to bring the best out of everybody, because leadership always operates in the context of relationships. And of course, I've spoken about the skills. When last did you update your basic leadership skills and knowledge? And I'm going to just close this bit by talking to you about Novartis, Vasan Narasimhan, who for me is probably one of the leaders that I can hand heart say would live these 5 mindsets and practices and upskill and reskill himself. He has gone into what he calls unbossing the company. He calls himself an accidental CEO, but he's also gone along and said curiosity is a core value in my organization. We are going to develop a culture of curiosity. And there are quite a few leaders. People always say to me, who does this? I interviewed 10 other leaders that did this really well. And so what we did for you is we built a program. And please start popping your questions for me in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you, anything about the 6 mindsets and practices or about the program. We built a 6-month transformative blended journey for you, where we can help you build these mindsets, practices, and skills. And as Tim said, it will be innovative theory, but it will be practical real-world applications. In fact, probably bring your own real issues into it. And we focus very much on a human, ethical, and collaborative approach to leadership. And it starts on the 3rd of September, and we take that all the way through to February with webinars, 3 of those, 2 in-person workshops, 3 podcasts, because I love how podcasts bring great learning. And then in addition to that, because we're working with brain theory, we're going to nudge you on those weeks where you don't have webinars, podcasts, or workshops. We're going to nudge you for 15 minutes a week just to create that learning habit. And that'll be supported by our learning pool, which is a world-class learning experience platform. And we'd love to see you there. Or even if you just want to work with me on LinkedIn and ask me more questions or ask us more questions now, my message to you is please invest in your leaders. They are overwhelmed. They are often frozen at this point, and they are struggling, and the older ways of looking at leadership and developing leadership is no longer working for them. So with that, Tim, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Marianne. We're going to move into the discussion session. If you can pop your questions into the Q&A box or indeed the chat column. I have my eyes on both, so don't worry about which one it arrives into. Aoife, I'm not sure if that was a kind of an inadvertent raised hand. If you've got a question you want to pop it into the chat or Q&A box, feel free to do so. I'm gonna kick off. I had a question I wanted to kick off with, but interestingly, Kira has effectively already asked the question. I was going to ask the question of the 6 mindsets that you have set out there for leadership, and I love the phrase complexity fit. But of those 6 enabling mindsets, I was going to ask, is there a hierarchy? Is anyone more or less important? Kira has a somewhat related question asking, is anyone more or less difficult for leaders to adopt?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer both. For me, the first 2 are the anchors. If you cannot start to make sense of, we respond badly to complexity and uncertainty. We want to step away from it. The most important thing, Tim, is we have to step into it and sit with that discomfort. So that first one, that contextual intelligence combined with that growth mindset of personal agility, I find if we can't get there, leaders struggle very much to do things differently. Coming back, Kira, the thing that's the hardest for people is letting go of that ego action logic as you move through the program. That vertical development piece is really hard for people because our self-worth is so tied to our ego, and we are really scared of being seen as not knowing the answer or not working hard enough, or, all these little things that keep us immune to change. And it's really important for us to find a way to start to evolve that ego, but it's a very scary process for people.
Thanks, Marianne. Kind of a couple of questions already beginning to flood in. I see Bernard. Hello, Bernard has asked a question about the our professional diploma framework. So just to say, no, this program it isn't one of our professional diplomas. It's a non-accredited, purely developmental program. This particular one. So for those that aren't perhaps maybe disposed to pursuing assessments within the kind of the academic framework. This presents another approach to development that allows you to avoid that particular requirement. Of course, the program will require lots of reflection. And lots of commitment and lots of engagement, lots of effort, as you would imagine. Marianne, I'm hoping you have the Q&A panel open as well.
I
Uh,
don't, Tim, so I'm going to rely on you to help me with that.
okay, well, I will. So Glenn has. I hope your
Oh, I do have it
library.
open now, Tim.
Okay, so I
Yes.
hope your library extends to
Ah,
Frederick Laloux's book Reinventing Organizations,
yeah.
and I interpret this as something of a there's a distributed leadership element to this, but there's
Mm,
also something about um, organizations without hierarchy.
mm.
Would you venture a short answer to that?
I'll venture a short answer. We're not going to particularly deal with hierarchical structure and non-structure. And Frederick Laloux's book, of course, is a great thought leadership piece about, but what is definitely changing, Glenn, and what we will definitely jump into is how is work changing, right? How is work changing because of all four of those things we spoke about, right? Hybrid, AI, all those things. We actually need to reinvent work. So even though Frederick Laloux's work is great, we're probably now more closer to what Ravinder Sutherson and those guys will say is a world without jobs and a world of skills. So that's really, and it does break the rigid hierarchical structures. So we will be touching on how do you lead in a world like that?
Excellent. Well done. Thank you, Marianne. Um, Yvonne has an interesting question. They're working in MNC. We're working on building a growth mindset. What would you recommend to move to application when there is uh, urgency to see results? There's obviously a kind of a business growth piece and a leadership
Yeah.
growth piece. I'm not going to say they're clearly related, but there may be an element of the business growth piece in that question as well.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think what's really interesting for me, Yvonne, is first of all, Novartis and Microsoft have had exceptional growth by using growth mindset and curiosity as a cultural framework because it's about how you see growth, isn't it? And what creates growth is a really important conversation to have with your executives, because they both measure curiosity and growth mindset in the results that the leaders deliver. So A is how do we see results? But because of that, they've also had exceptional, because of the innovation, because of the thinking that evolves from growth mindset, they've had exceptional business results. And so it really is that conversation with leaders about that and explaining that to them, that, growth really is about growth mindset helps us to create a culture of curiosity and innovation, and helping each other, which is what Microsoft measures. And so ultimately it leads to results and great results, and also sustainable results.
Great, thanks, Marianne. Glenn is asking about the name of that author again. We'll get it for you, Glenn. We'll pop it into the chat later, or
I can type a quick answer there for you.
Okay, very good, excellent. Um, So, and Marianne, I'm going to, if you're typing there, I'm going to test your
I'm
multitasking
done.
skills now. Okay, very good. So you can focus on my question. So, I'm interested, and it somewhat relates to the question that was just that Yvonne posed as well. Um, so I'm thinking here, you talked quite a bit about adult development. You talked a lot about the kind of rewiring of the brain. You talked about learning new behaviors and skills. And I'm really interested and I suppose within the framework of the program that you outlined, um, what is the process there that enables people to make this step change in their leadership behavior? You know, what gets them to be, because clearly we don't want, this is not about people being able to write a good essay on leadership at the end of this program. This is about them leading differently and being different leaders in practice as they are experienced by the people in their organization. How does the program support that real felt change?
Yeah, that's a great question because when I did the PhD, you've seen the six mindsets and practices. That's the what of leadership. The how of leadership and how you develop leadership was the other part of my PhD. And what was really, really important was to look at how does behavior change? How do people change? And you have to look much broader than just human resources, organizational psychology. I went to education, I went to brain theory, I went to sociology, I went to anthropology, I went to behavioral economics. And there's a couple of things. One is that the reason we do it over 6 months term is so that we don't have wonderful 3 days of overloaded knowledge and then we walk away. We break it down into smaller parts that we can make 1% improvements on, which we call atomic habits. We build it into real habits and practices when we work together so that I start to spend a day, an hour a week on it. It becomes a practice because that's the only time I'll actually get to start to learn to do this. So we break it down into smaller pieces. We apply it to real world problems people have. We don't use case studies. We say, what is your challenge? What are you working with? Because that's much more real for people. They can change things that are real for them. But also, as you said, we've blended the learning methods. We've blended it between workshops where people are collaborating. And those of you who are on the HR program will know this with an incredible cohort of people that they can learn from socially, because social learning is critical, that can challenge their ideas and that can really bring, we can apply things. So the workshops are very much application workshops where we are working, we're not sitting. Webinars, we're doing slightly more learning. Podcasts, we're learning from people who apply. And the micro learning moments of 15 minutes are like behavioral nudges that help me to change. And we go after this repetition, repetition, repetition of these habits and practices so that it becomes our new way of working. It's almost like I'm missing that run. I need to go running because I haven't done it this week. It changes the brain, and then we can start to, and then of course we have to keep doing it. So learning that assessment, doing, putting in place, assessing again, starting again, that forever ongoing learning practice is critical.
And let me encourage people to continue to drop questions into either the chat or the Q&A. Yeah, and that's very interesting, Mariana. I think it's probably maybe fair to say that how the program is set up, it's very much designed to close the gap between the person's day job or their organizational reality, and the program, that the two things are not separate. You don't leave the job to go for a day to the program, that you're kind of living both very much in a parallel way, with one informing the other, and people working on their own real problems and their own real kind of issues and challenges in the course of their leadership. If I can ask a kind of a question that is somewhat related to that, and something of an extension of an earlier question. I mean, obviously, one of the barriers to change can be when people step back from a very supportive environment on something like a development program where they're part of a learning community, and they are excited, inspired, to think differently about their leadership and how they lead. And then they return to the day job and back into the organization. And the existing culture and structure and so on begin to kind of strangulate the early shoots of life of
Yeah.
this new way of leading.
Yeah.
Any thoughts or any tips on how to kind of be resilient almost with a new way of leading and a new way of approaching things, perhaps in a culture that's more or less receptive?
Yeah. And this is something that we work on over the 6 months. And I think a few keys to that. Number one is that every time you go back from a session, from a podcast, from share it, share the learning, share it, share what's thinking, share it, share the books, share the articles with colleagues, start to build a conversation around the things that you're building. Don't hold it for yourself. Don't come back after the 6 months and like that Korean drama crash landing on you. Don't come in there and crash land on the poor people, not your employees or anybody else. Every time you go back, bring your direct reports in, bring your peers in, right? Share something with your board, share something with your C-suite. And also because you're making 1% changes, Tim, it's not that crash landing on your experience, right? You are genuinely slowly shifting, role modeling different ways, sharing your knowledge, and starting to build shared language, shared practices, right? So that it starts to be more like a viral influencing in the organization. And there's a little bit of show and tell, isn't there? Where you do well with your team and others start to hear. And then, people like to then learn from each other. So you also always look for the coalition of the willing. We talk a little bit, Tim, you're going to laugh, but we talk a little bit about activism, activist theory, and there is some wonderful theories about when does activism work and when does it not work that leaders can use in their influencing. And that collaboration module will really get into that, right? Because it's so important to create, I'm going to use some words that were recently used in the media, coalition of the willing is always the best way to go. And getting the neutral ones across to your way. But we definitely need to talk about that, Tim, because I've seen too many times how people lose their enthusiasm within a month of being back after a fantastically inspirational course.
And just building on what you've just said there, I suppose one suggestion is there will be, I know lots of people on the webinar today who are potentially thinking about a development journey, either in the context of this program or their own journey, that will be thinking about it for themselves. But there will also be people on the webinar today, perhaps are thinking about leadership more generally within their own organization. And of course, building on what you've just said, two or three people
Oh,
from
yeah.
the same organization on a program like this can be very helpful to kind of build that critical mass of people with a similar kind of thinking and language, and be able to build that momentum. I'm just keen to, Yvonne did ask a supplementary question around growth mindset and any particular tool or framework that might support the development of a growth mindset.
Yeah, you're very right, Yvonne, because when you look at Carol Dweck and everybody else's work, it's very conceptual. It's very hard for people to actually make it work. But there are some very specific habits and practices that we have developed over time. Very simple things like, and it's a combination of different thinkers, Yvonne, I would say to you, that I've brought together everything I could possibly find on growth mindset, whether it's, I think you have to talk about what, as an individual, how do I catch my fixed mindset voice, because it's mostly the voice in my head, and talk back to it. So that's one of the things we use. The other thing we use is adding the word yet, just as a practice to anything. We can't do it yet. We don't know how to do it yet. When your team says this can't happen, you go yet. So you just literally start to shift the conversation into possibility and not close-ended kind of fixed mindset. There are things that Microsoft do, like they have a little card in every meeting room where people within like the first 10 minutes, they would say, is this a growth mindset or fixed mindset meeting? Do we need to adjust? So I think what you really have to do with all these concepts is break them into habits and practices that's broadly used, right? And that becomes a new language that people work with. And then you will see it by itself. Or you do what Novartis did. You have a curiosity month where people get curiosity badges for being curious about stuff and learning about stuff. And the more they do, the grander the badge becomes, and they post it all on LinkedIn. There's a lot of ways you can stimulate curiosity and growth mindset in the organization.
I'm now struck by, typically, you come to a webinar, you always go away with at least one idea, and the power of the word yet has now definitely resonated with me and stuck with me as a definitive takeaway. Is this perhaps an unfair question to kind of wrap it up, because we're almost at the quarter hour? You know, those involved in the leadership field are um, used to thinking about concepts and ideas such as authentic leadership, adaptive leadership, various other frameworks of emotional intelligence, uh, leadership styles, a variety of leadership theories and perspectives. How would you describe this? Is this another theory? Is it a fusion of theories? How would you describe it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I looked at all of that, Tim. I literally looked at everything that's ever been written about leadership and the actual impacts it's had. And that's why I wrote 1.0 to 4.0. This is what I would call, especially the personal agility, it's the simulation of mindsets and practices from everything that's ever been written. Some of it comes bits from authenticity, some of it comes bits from emotional intelligence, put together in what works from those things in the context of the future of work that is complex and uncertain. So it's a framework, it's a meta framework of leadership made up of the best, throwing out the worst, made up of the best, looking at what really works and putting that into an understandable framework, right? So that people can actually get their arms around it.
Excellent. I love that description. A meta framework for leadership, and the keeping the best, throwing out the worst. So a little bit of a winnowing of some of those theories, and then very much saying what resonates now as we look forward into the future of work, what remains relevant, which is very critical indeed. We won't answer this question now because I do need to wrap up. But Aoife, we've noted your question. I'm going to get Marianne to connect with you directly with an email or something to just to answer that question around any particular frameworks relating to collaboration in a distributed workforce. I know without a shadow of a doubt that she will absolutely have something for you. And you can see my colleague Patrick Murray who's our head of open programs, has added in, has mentioned that the slides will be available. So can I say Patrick's details are on screen now. If anybody is, well, I hope you, first of all, you've enjoyed the webinar for itself, for the content that Marianne has shared. It's been sort of short and sweet, but hopefully we have stimulated you to think about leadership in a slightly different way. Marianne's book is there, obviously, Leadership Fit for the Future of Work. But we would obviously be very keen for you to think about coming on our program by the same name that starts in September. And we have a parallel program on adaptive HR running at the moment. I know certainly the feedback from participants on that program that is a similar kind of setup in terms of the program journey. People have been very engaged and find it really, really excellent so far. So if you think that this is something that has stimulated you enough and challenged you enough to maybe ask a little bit more about how you might get on this journey yourself, how you may move from thought to action yourself, then certainly we'd be delighted to talk to you. So Patrick's details are there. Please feel free to email him or ring him. He's very friendly, and he will be delighted to have a conversation with you. So look, we promised to have you done or have you away from here at 13:45. It is now 13:46. So we are there or thereabouts. On your behalf, I'm going to thank Marianne for her excellent contribution, and thank you all once again for attending. And we look forward to engaging with you either online in this format again, or indeed we'd be delighted to see you in person here at Smurfit in Blackrock as well. So thank you to everybody, and enjoy what's left of your lunch and have a very good day. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Take care.